The first time I witnessed a human engage in combat without the aid of a weapon, I emitted a sound that my species translates as a chittering laugh. My comms implant, a sophisticated device lodged just behind my primary auditory organ, fizzled with a burst of static as the unfamiliar vocalization escaped my resonant chambers. From across the observation deck, Commander Eva Rostova fixed me with a gaze so intense it felt like it could pierce the reinforced plating of the station's hull. But what was my expected reaction? We had just been presented with a spectacle of profound absurdity. A human, a creature of soft flesh and brittle bone named Elias Vance, was stepping into the designated training circle to face a fully armed Kthar warrior. And the human had nothing. No kinetic pulse rifle, no stun baton, not even a simple ceremonial dagger. He was utterly, bewilderingly empty. This is the great equalizer the Council is so concerned about? I whispered to Subcommander Jax, my crystalline colleague whose multifaceted eyes were currently fixed on the arena below. Jax's body, a lattice of interlocking mineral structures, hummed with a low frequency I had learned to associate with deep-seated anxiety. "This is what the Celestial Accord fears, Specialist Kalen," Jax replied, its voice a series of resonant clicks translated directly into my auditory nerve. "Simply observe." The Kthar, a mountain of muscle and chitin named Korgith, stood nearly 3 meters tall. His arms, thick as the support beams that held up this very station, ended in claws that could tear through steel mesh. He hefted an electrified glaive, the energy field crackling along its length with an audible hum that promised a swift and messy end. His mandibles clicked together, a sound I had come to understand was the Kthar equivalent of a cruel, mocking laugh. Elias, in contrast, just stood there. His hands were open and empty at his sides, his feet planted in a strange, wide stance that seemed to offer no defensive advantage. His breathing was controlled, a slow and steady rhythm that suggested he was waiting for a meal ration, not facing imminent dismemberment. "Begin," Commander Rostova's voice, amplified and devoid of emotion, boomed through the arena's speakers. What transpired in the following moments fundamentally violated every tactical doctrine I had absorbed during my 6 cycles at the Zypharian Military Academy. Korgith charged forward, not with the speed of a predator, but with the inexorable, ground-shaking momentum of a geological event. The glaive's energy field left a shimmering trail in the air, more than enough voltage to stop a light armored vehicle in its tracks. Elias did not retreat. He did not even dodge. He waited until the last possible nanosecond, a point of no return for any rational being, and then he moved. Not away from the attack, but into it. My 3 circulatory organs nearly seized. Elias's hand, those 5-fingered appendages that looked so soft and vulnerable, shot out and closed around the shaft of the glaive, just below the crackling energy tip. His body contorted, twisting in a manner that seemed to defy the structural limitations of a vertebrate skeleton. Suddenly, the immense momentum of Korgith's charge was turned against him. The Kthar warrior stumbled forward, his balance completely shattered. In a fluid motion, Elias swept his foot behind Korgith's leg. 300 kilograms of armored warrior crashed to the deck plates with a sound like a cargo container being dropped from a great height. The electrified glaive clattered away, now silent. What in the 7 systems was that? I breathed, the words barely a whisper. But Elias was not finished. Before Korgith could even begin to recover, the human dropped onto the Kthar's broad back. One arm snaked around the warrior's thick, neck-like joint, while his legs hooked around Korgith's torso in a complex configuration of levers and locks. The Kthar thrashed wildly, his powerful arms flailing backward, trying to grab his assailant, to pry him off. Elias simply held on, making minute adjustments to his grip, his face a mask of concentration, almost bordering on boredom. 15 seconds later, Korgith's massive hand slapped the deck 3 times. The universal, and deeply humiliating, signal for submission. The arena fell into a stunned silence. Elias released him immediately, rose to his feet, and extended a hand to help the Kthar up. Korgith stared at the offered hand as if it were a venomous serpent, then, after a long pause, slowly accepted it. "Adequate demonstration, Specialist Vance," Commander Rostova announced, her voice breaking the spell. "Session dismissed." I remained frozen in place as the other trainees filed out of the observation deck, my own scales tingling with a peculiar sensation, a volatile mixture of terror and profound fascination. Jax nudged me with one of its sharp, crystalline elbows. "Still find it amusing?" Jax asked, its voice laced with a dry, mineral wit. That was, how did he didn't even. I stammered, my vocal processors struggling to form a coherent sentence. Jax's body gave a sympathetic hum. That is the standard reaction. Every single time. 20 minutes later, I found myself in the station's vast recreation center, still trying to process the impossible event I had just witnessed. The celestial accord had been in a state of formal peace with humanity for 2 standard cycles now, ever since they joined our alliance against the expansionist Silicate Collective. We had all heard the stories, the whispers that circulated through the mess halls and barracks. Humans don't need weapons. They are weapons. I had dismissed it as propaganda, as a kind of psychological warfare. Every species boasts of their combat prowess. The Kthar trumpet their raw strength. The Sylvari from the forest moons pride themselves on their lightning-fast reflexes. My own people, the Zypharians, are known for our strategic minds and our natural resistance to most known toxins. But this was something else entirely. It was a different paradigm of combat entirely. You look like someone just tried to explain the principles of quantum tunneling to a juvenile Grokt, a voice said beside me. I turned to see Elias Vance himself standing there, holding 2 containers of that strange, bubbly, brown liquid humans seem to be addicted to. He offered one to me. I do not believe my digestive system can process that, I said, my voice still carrying a hint of defensive skepticism. Probably right, he replied with a shrug. More for me, then. He took a long drink, a look of simple pleasure on his face, and sat down on the bench across from me. Up close, he looked even less threatening. Average height for a human, perhaps 1.7 meters. A lean build, with no visible natural armor, no hardened hide, no venomous spines or claws. His eyes were a strange shade of brown, an earthy color that seemed to shift and deepen in the station's artificial light. That thing you did in the arena, I finally managed to articulate. Our combat databases have no analog for that technique. Elias smiled, and I was reminded that humans possessed more teeth than seemed strictly necessary for their omnivorous diet. It's called jiu-jitsu. Brazilian jiu-jitsu, specifically. It's been a formalized art on Earth for about a century, but its philosophical and mechanical roots go back much, much further. A century? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. Our historical records show that humanity only achieved rudimentary space flight 4 cycles ago. Yep, he said, taking another drink from his container. We've been fighting each other hand to hand for thousands of years. Developing systems, refining techniques, testing them in countless conflicts. Jiu-jitsu, judo, wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai, karate, kung fu, Krav Maga. He counted them off on his fingers. And those are just some of the formalized, named systems. Every culture, every region on Earth developed their own methods of unarmed combat. My resonant chambers went dry. Are you telling me that your species has spent millennia perfecting the art of killing one another without weapons? Well, when you phrase it so bluntly, it sounds rather barbaric, Elias grinned, a disarming expression. But yeah, pretty much. You see, here's the fundamental problem we kept running into. Weapons break. They run out of ammunition. They get lost or taken away. But your body? He tapped his own chest. Your body is always with you. So, we figured we should probably learn how to use it as effectively as possible. That's horrifying, I said, the words feeling inadequate. Is it? He tilted his head, a gesture of genuine curiosity. Every species in the Accord fights, Kalen. It's a basic function of survival. We just took it really, really seriously. Before I could formulate a response to that, a piercing alarm blared through the recreation center. Red emergency lights began to pulse along the walls, and Commander Rostova's voice crackled over the station-wide intercom, all traces of her earlier detachment replaced with urgent command. All combat personnel to your stations. We have a hostile boarding situation in Sector 7. Repeat, hostile boarding in Sector 7. This is not a drill. Elias was on his feet in an instant, that casual demeanor vanishing like smoke in a vacuum. The silicates, he said, his voice flat. It has to be. I was already moving towards the door, my hand instinctively going to the sidearm holstered at my hip, my fingers checking the power charge. They've been probing our defense perimeter for weeks. It was only a matter of time. We ran through the corridors, joining streams of other soldiers from a dozen different species, all heading toward their assigned positions. The station shuddered violently as something massive impacted the outer hull. My tactical display, projected onto my wrist-mounted gauntlet, flashed red, showing 3 separate hull breaches, all in the commercial district. This was very bad news. That sector was densely populated with civilians. Kalen, Vance, Subcommander Jax's voice cut through the chaos in my comm unit. We need fire support at Breach Point Alpha. Half our security team is pinned down. The silicates have deployed some kind of energy shielding that's deflecting our pulse rounds. On our way, I responded, taking a sharp turn down a narrow maintenance corridor to bypass the panicked civilian traffic. Elias kept pace beside me, his breathing still steady and controlled despite the frantic sprint. We arrived at Breach Point Alpha to a scene of pure chaos. The silicates had cut through the station's hull with terrifyingly precise thermal lances, and now a dozen of their shock troops were advancing through the ragged opening. They were like nothing else in the galaxy. Biomechanical horrors, a fusion of organic tissue and synthetic implants, driven by a networked consciousness that made individual casualties utterly meaningless. They moved with an eerie, synchronized purpose. And Jax was right. Our plasma fire was hitting some kind of localized energy barrier around each unit, the bolts splashing off like water on a superheated surface. Energy dampening field, I shouted over the roar of weapons fire. They've adapted to our standard tactics. Of course they have, Elias muttered beside me. Then, to my absolute horror, he calmly holstered his own sidearm and started walking toward the line of advancing silicates. What are you doing? I grabbed his arm, but he shook me off with a gentle but firm pressure. Energy weapons don't work, he said, as if explaining a simple equation. So, we go old school. He cracked his knuckles, a sound that was somehow more menacing than the crackle of the silicate's energy fields. I heard several of our soldiers make nervous, guttural sounds. Tell your people to create an opening, Elias said, his eyes never leaving the approaching biomechanoids. I'll need about 3 seconds. You're insane, I stated. There were 12 of them. 14, actually. I spotted 2 more pulling themselves through the breach behind the first wave. His gaze remained locked on the advancing horde. The opening, Kalen. Now would be good. I looked at Jax, who gave me a desperate, almost imperceptible nod through the chaos. What choice did we have? All units, concentrate fire on the left flank. 3-second burst, then cease fire. Our remaining soldiers, maybe 20 of us in total, opened up on the left side of the silicate formation. The energy barriers flared a brilliant, blinding white as they absorbed the full force of our onslaught. The silicates on that side slowed their advance, their collective attention momentarily drawn to the new, more concentrated threat. Elias moved. I have since reviewed the security footage from that engagement no fewer than 17 times, and I still cannot fully comprehend the fluid violence of his motion. One moment he was standing beside me, the next he was among them. The first silicate didn't even register him as a threat before Elias's elbow drove into its primary optical sensor with enough force to shatter the synthetic housing. As the creature staggered, Elias grabbed one of its multi-jointed limbs and used the creature's own momentum to hurl it into 2 of its companions. The silicate's shields protected them from energy weapons, but apparently no one had told them about the principles of kinetic force and leverage. Elias flowed between them like a river finding its path. A knee strike collapsed the thoracic cavity of another creature. A twisting throw sent a third crashing into a bulkhead with enough force to dent the reinforced plating. He moved constantly, never remaining in one place for more than a fraction of a second, using their own bodies as temporary shields against their companions' attacks. Suppressing fire. Cover him! Jack screamed. We opened up again, forcing the remaining silicates to split their attention between the human-shaped whirlwind of destruction and our distant, ineffectual fire. But honestly, I don't think Elias needed the help. A larger silicate shock trooper, a unit designed for heavy assault, managed to get a grip on him from behind with its powerful mechanical arms. Those arms were designed to crush the hulls of ground vehicles. They should have crushed the human instantly. Instead, Elias dropped his weight, twisting his spine in a way that made my own exoskeleton ache in sympathetic pain. And suddenly, he was behind the silicate. His arm wrapped around a critical neck joint, his legs hooked around the creature's torso, and he applied pressure in a way that made the silicate's central processor visibly bulge against its armored casing. The biomechanoid made a sound like grinding gears and went limp. 5 seconds. The entire fight lasted perhaps 5 seconds. Elias stood among the disabled silicates, breathing hard but his movements still controlled, and looked back at us. Someone want to finish them off with actual weapons now? I can hold them down, but I can't permanently disable them barehanded. Their armor is too thick. We stared. All of us. Even Jax, who I now realized must have seen this kind of thing before, looked visibly shaken. Weapons free! I finally shouted, finding my voice. Target the disabled silicates. Our plasma fire made short work of the incapacitated creatures. Without their mobility, their energy shields couldn't properly deflect a sustained, focused barrage. As the last silicate fell, Elias walked back to our defensive line, rolling his shoulders as if loosening up after a strenuous workout. Anyone got water? I'm parched, he said. You just. I couldn't form the words. With your bare hands? Well, hands, elbows, knees, feet, he clarified, accepting a water bottle from a stunned Thar soldier. Like I said, your body is always with you. The silicates relied on their tech too much. It made them predictable. Predictable? I repeated numbly, the word feeling alien on my tongue. Commander Rostova's voice came through the comm, demanding a status report. Jax responded while I was still trying to reboot my own cognitive processes. Hostiles neutralized, Commander. Minimal casualties on our side. How many silicates? 14, sir. There was a long pause on the other end. 14 with a 20-soldier unit. That's impressive. I'm sending reinforcements to secure the area and patch that breach. Well done, Sub-Commander. Elias finished his water and tossed the empty bottle into a nearby recycler. So, Kalen, he said, turning to me. Still think it's funny that humans fight without weapons? I looked at the scattered, sparking bodies of the silicates, at the dented bulkheads, at the human who had just dismantled 14 biomechanical killing machines with nothing but his body and his training. No, I said quietly. No, I really don't. He clapped me on the shoulder, and I tried not to flinch at the reminder of what those seemingly ordinary hands were capable of. Don't worry about it. Most species have that reaction. It's why the brass makes us do these demonstrations. Better you see it in a training environment than panic when it happens in actual combat. That was actual combat, I pointed out. True, Elias grinned, a spark of his earlier humor returning. But hey, now you know. Humans don't need weapons to be dangerous. We've been the apex predators on a death world for millions of years. We just got really good at the whole survival thing. As maintenance crews arrived to begin repairs and medics began checking the wounded, I found myself thinking about Earth's long and contentious application to the Celestial Accord. All those debates in the council chambers about whether humanity was too violent, too aggressive, too unpredictable to be welcomed into civilized space. We had been asking the wrong questions entirely. It wasn't about whether humans were dangerous. It was about making very, very sure they stayed on our side. 3 standard days after the silicate incident, I received a summons to Commander Rostova's office. Not an invitation. A summons. That is never a good sign. I found Elias already there, leaning against the far wall with that casual confidence that humans seem to radiate even in the most serious situations. He nodded at me as I entered, and I noticed his knuckles were wrapped in some kind of white, sterile fabric. Specialist Kalin, Commander Rostova began, her crest feathers, a feature of her avian species, bristling in a way I had learned meant she was deeply agitated. I have a problem. Sir? The silicate attack wasn't random, she continued, her voice low and serious. Intelligence has managed to partially decode their transmission logs from the disabled units. She activated a holographic display between us, showing a complex web of data. They were specifically targeting our research wing. More precisely, Dr. Eris Thorne's xenobiology lab. My scales went cold. Dr. Eris Thorne was the station's leading expert on cross-species pathogens and counteragents. Her research into developing a universal antiviral had already saved thousands of lives across a dozen worlds. They wanted to kidnap her, Elias said, his voice flat. It wasn't a question. Correct, Rostova confirmed. And based on intercepted communications, we believe they are going to try again, and soon. Possibly within the next rotation. The commander's talons tapped against her polished desk, a nervous habit. Standard protocol would be to immediately evaluate Dr. Thorne to a secure facility. However, her current research is at a critical, delicate phase. She refuses to leave her lab, and frankly, the Accord cannot afford the delay. We need her work completed. So, you want us to guard her? I asked. More than that, Rostova looked between us. Kalin, you are one of our best tactical analysts. Your ability to see patterns and predict enemy movements is unparalleled. Elias, you've proven your capabilities in a way that cannot be ignored. I want you two to protect her. From the inside. You want us to be bait, Elias said, still maintaining his relaxed posture. Let them come, he continued, anticipating her next words. Stop them at close range, where their energy shields are less effective and their networked consciousness can't adapt as quickly. Essentially, yes, Rostova confirmed. The lab has been retrofitted with localized dampening fields that should interfere with silicate technology. This means our standard energy weapons will be limited or completely useless inside the lab. Your particular skill set, Specialist Vance, becomes invaluable in that environment. I felt my stomach sack twist into a tight knot. Commander, with all due respect, that is a suicide mission. If they send a larger force, you hold them off long enough for reinforcements to arrive, Elias finished, pushing himself off the wall. I'm in. When do we start? Commander Rostova's crest feathers seemed to settle slightly. Immediately. Dr. Thorne is expecting you. As we left the office, I grabbed Elias's arm. Are you actually insane? We barely survived last time, and that was with a full unit providing support. Last time we were surprised and unprepared. This time, we're the ones setting the terms of engagement. He started walking toward the research wing. Besides, you heard the commander. They need that doctor's research. Sometimes the mission matters more than the risk. That's easy for you to say. You can apparently strangle armored killing machines with your bare hands. Not exactly bare, he said, holding up his wrapped knuckles. I sprained 2 fingers last time. Silicate armor is tougher than it looks. Oh, wonderful, I muttered. That makes me feel so much better. Dr. Eris Thorne turned out to be a lumine, a species of sentient, humanoid-shaped beings composed of a bioluminescent, plant-like matrix. All flowing, fibrous tendrils and skin that pulsed with soft light, the color of which shifted with her mood. Currently, she was flashing an irritated, deep purple as we entered her pristine laboratory. More soldiers, she bubbled through her sophisticated translation collar, her voice a series of melodic tones. As if I did not already have enough disruption to my work. Dr. Thorne, we're here to protect you, I began, trying to be diplomatic. I do not need protection. I need people to stop interrupting my work. She gestured with a delicate tendril at a complex array of humming, crystalline equipment in the corner of the lab. Do you have any idea how delicate this cellular sequencing is? One vibration, one minor power fluctuation, and 3 months of research becomes worthless. Elias walked slowly around the perimeter of the lab, his eyes methodically cataloging every detail, every potential weakness. How many entrances? What? Dr. Thorne seemed taken aback by the abrupt question. Entrances. To the lab. How many are there? 2, she replied, her light shifting to a confused orange. The main door we came through, and an emergency maintenance airlock in the back. Windows. Vents. Access panels on the floor or ceiling. This is a sterile research facility, young man, she said, her tone patronizing. We do not have windows. The ventilation system is a standard Class 4 recirculator. Nothing large enough for a. She paused, her skin shifting from confused orange to a worried, sickly yellow. Oh. You think they would come through the vents? Yeah, Elias said, kneeling beside a floor-level air intake vent. He ran his fingers along the seal. The silicates can compress their organic components. I saw it in their attack patterns during the breach. They'll use any opening. Can we seal it? I asked. And risk contaminating my entire lab with unfiltered, unsterilized air from the maintenance tunnels? Dr. Thorne's light flashed a furious red. Absolutely not. Elias stood up, dusting off his hands. Then we work with what we have. Kaylin, I need you to set up motion sensors at both entrances. Standard military issues should work even with the dampening fields active. Doctor, how long until your research phase is complete? Dr. Thorne's tendrils twisted in agitation. 18 hours minimum. Possibly 24 if there are any complications. Great, Elias said, his voice dripping with an irony that was likely lost on the Lumine. So, we just need to survive a full day cycle. No problem. He smiled, but I noticed it didn't quite reach his eyes this time. The first 8 hours passed in a tense, suffocating silence. I positioned myself near the main entrance, my plasma rifle set to maximum charge, though I knew it would likely be useless. Elias took up a position near the rear maintenance airlock, sitting cross-legged on the floor, his eyes closed in what looked like meditation. Dr. Thorne worked at her equipment, occasionally muttering to herself about cellular degradation and cross-contamination, her skin flickering between a focused blue and an anxious yellow. Around hour 9, my motion sensor pinged softly. Contact, I whispered into my comm main entrance. Multiple signatures. Hold position, Elias's calm voice replied instantly. Let them fully commit. Doctor, get to the center of the lab, away from both doors. Now. But my samples. Dr. Thorne began to protest. Doctor, Elias said, his voice dropping to a tone that left no room for argument. Something in his tone made her obey instantly. Her tendrils shot out, gathering her most critical data tablets as she moved to the relative safety of the lab center, positioning herself behind a reinforced analysis workstation. The main door didn't explode inward like I expected. Instead, the security lock simply dissolved, melting into a puddle of slag under the application of some kind of powerful acid compound. 6 silicate shock troops flowed through the opening, their movements perfectly synchronized in that unnerving way that spoke of their shared networked consciousness. I opened fire immediately. The plasma bolts hit their energy shields and scattered harmlessly, but the kinetic impacts did seem to slow them down, forcing them to recalculate their advance. It bought us precious seconds. Vent! Elias shouted. They're coming through the vent. I risked a glance backward and saw 3 more silicates pulling themselves through the floor ventilation, their bodies compressing and distorting in ways that violated several known laws of biology and mechanics. They moved with horrifying purpose, directly toward Dr. Thorne. Elias met them halfway. The first silicate never even saw him coming. He had positioned himself flat against the wall beside the vent opening, perfectly concealed. As the creature emerged, Elias's foot drove into its primary sensor cluster with a wet snap that echoed through the lab. It collapsed, its motor functions instantly disrupted. The second and third silicates adapted instantly, spreading apart to flank him. Smart. But Elias was smarter. He grabbed the disabled silicate's body and swung it like a battering ram into one of its companions. The creature's shields, designed to deflect energy, did nothing to protect it from the kinetic impact of one of its own kind. They went down in a tangled heap of limbs and synthetic components. The third silicate lunged at Elias, extending razor-sharp blade appendages from its arms. Elias dropped low, impossibly low, and the blades passed harmlessly over him. Then he was inside the creature's guard, one hand grabbing a critical joint, the other striking at connection points with precise, brutal efficiency. "Kalen, a little busy here, right?" Elias grunted. I had my own problems. The 6 silicates at the main entrance had adapted to my plasma fire. Their shields were recalibrating in real time, becoming more efficient at dissipating the energy. They advanced in a coordinated pattern, using the lab's expensive equipment as cover. I fired continuously, trying to hold them back, but my rifle's charge indicator was dropping at an alarming rate. "Running out of power," I called out. "Then use what you've got left smart," Elias yelled back. He had one silicate in some kind of complex joint lock, using its body to block another. "Aim for the same spot. Overload their shields with concentrated fire." I focused my fire on the lead silicate, every shot hitting the exact same point on its energy barrier. The shield flared brighter and brighter, struggling to dissipate the concentrated energy. Then, with a pop like a bursting bubble, it failed. The plasma bolt punched through and hit the silicate's central processor. It jerked once and went still. "Yes," I shouted, then immediately felt foolish for celebrating 1 kill when 5 more remained. But the tactic worked. I repeated it on the second silicate, concentrating my fire until its shield collapsed. 2 down. My rifle died on the third one, the charge depleted, the indicator flashing a baleful, empty red. "Out!" I screamed. "Fall back to the center. Use the equipment as barriers." I scrambled backward, trying to put workstations and analysis machines between me and the advancing silicates. They moved faster now, sensing my vulnerability. My hand went to the ceremonial knife at my belt, a 6-inch blade of folded Zypharian steel that suddenly felt completely and utterly inadequate. One of the silicates reached me before I could even draw it. Its mechanical arm swung in a wide arc that would have taken my head off my shoulders. I dropped flat, feeling the displacement of air as the limb passed overhead, and rolled desperately to the side. My military training, all those drills about close-quarters combat that I had always half-dismissed because who fights without weapons, kicked in. Humans, apparently. And now, me. The silicate loomed over me, its arm raised for a final, killing strike. I kicked up at its leg joint with everything I had, targeting the same structural weak point Elias had exploited earlier. The creature staggered, and I rolled away, finally managing to draw my knife. It wouldn't do much against their armored carapace, but at least I would go down fighting. Then Elias was there, moving like a wave of pure, liquid violence. He had somehow disabled all 3 silicates at the rear and crossed the lab in seconds. His shoulder drove into my attacker's midsection, the impact actually lifting the heavy biomechanoid off its feet. They crashed into a workstation together, and Elias's hands found that same critical neck joint pressure point. The silicate went limp. 4 left. And they were reconsidering their approach. The networked intelligence driving them was learning, adapting in real time. They spread out, trying to flank us, to surround us. "Back to back," Elias said quietly, his voice steady. "Watch the flanks." I pressed my spine against his, my knife held ready, watching 2 of the silicates while he faced the other pair. My 3 hearts hammered so hard against my ribs I thought they would burst. You know, Elias said conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather, this would be a lot easier if you guys knew some actual hand-to-hand combat. Some of us didn't spend thousands of years perfecting murder techniques. I shot back. Fair point, he conceded. The 4 silicates attacked simultaneously from all sides. Elias moved right. I went left. And somehow, we didn't collide, our movements guided by a mix of training and instinct. I slashed at the nearest silicate with my knife, more to distract and create an opening than to cause any real damage. It worked. The creature's attention fixed on the physical threat of the blade, its shield recalibrating to block it, which meant it wasn't watching my other hand. I grabbed a heavy molecular analyzer from the nearby table and swung it with desperate strength into the silicate's optical cluster. The analyzer shattered, but so did the sensor cluster. Sparks flew and the creature stumbled back, blinded. Elias had already dropped one of his opponents with a leg sweep that shouldn't have worked on something so heavy, but somehow did. He flowed into a dominant position, raining down elbow strikes on connection points until the silicate stopped moving. The last 2 silicates reassessed their strategy. I could almost see the networked intelligence calculating the odds, considering a tactical retreat. Then they did something unexpected. They ignored us and charged past us, directly at Dr. Thorne. No! Elias and I shouted simultaneously. But Dr. Thorne was not helpless. Her luminous tendrils lashed out with surprising speed, striking one silicate with enough force to crack its casing. Lumine were physically stronger than they looked, I remembered belatedly. An adaptation from their high-pressure aquatic homeworld. Still, 2 silicates against 1 scientist were terrible odds. Elias reached them first. He grabbed one from behind, wrapping his legs around its torso and his arm around its neck joint. The creature thrashed violently, trying to shake him off, but he held on with grim determination. I jumped on the other one's back, my knife raised, and drove the blade down into a seam in its armor. It didn't penetrate far, but it was enough to jam the limb's actuator. The silicate spun, trying to dislodge me, and I held on purely through a combination of terror and stubbornness. Dr. Thorne's tendrils wrapped around the creature's legs, pulling it off balance. We went down together in a heap of limbs, metal, and desperation. I lost my knife in the fall and found myself face to face with the silicate's remaining optical sensor, seeing my own terrified reflection in its cold, unfeeling lens. Its arm rose, a blade extending from the wrist. Then Elias was there again, having dispatched his target. His foot came down on the silicate's arm joint with a sickening crunch, and the blade stopped inches from my face. "Stay down," he said, then applied that same neck pressure technique. The silicate shuddered and went still. Silence. We lay there in the wreckage of the lab, all of us breathing hard. Dr. Thorne's skin flashed through a rainbow of shocked colors. I felt my own scales tingling with the crash of adrenaline. "Everyone alive?" Elias finally asked. "Barely," I gasped. "My research." Dr. Thorne suddenly scrambled to her feet, her tendrils flying across her displays. "No, wait." "Yes." The cellular sequencer maintained integrity. "Oh, thank the cosmic tides." Elias pulled himself up, wincing as he checked his wrapped hands. "Definitely broke another finger that time." "How are you so calm?" I demanded, still lying on the floor. "We just fought off 9 silicate shock troops." "Practice," he said, sitting down heavily on an intact workstation. "Also, I'm pretty sure I'm going into shock, so the calm thing might not last." He looked at me. "Kalen, you did good. That molecular analyzer move was smart." I panicked and grabbed the nearest heavy object. "The best combat tactics often look like panic from the inside," he smiled weakly. "You improvised, you adapted, you survived. That's all that matters." Before I could respond, the main door burst open properly this time, and Commander Rostova rushed in with a full security team. She stopped short, her feathers standing on end as she took in the scene of wholesale destruction and the 9 disabled silicates. "By the first egg," she breathed. "How many?" 9, Elias said. Would have been easier with weapons that actually worked in here. You, the two of you, and Dr. Thorne. Rostova seemed unable to complete a sentence. The doctor has surprisingly good reflexes, I offered, still trying to catch my breath. Sir, Dr. Thorne's skin flushed a pleased, vibrant pink. I did contribute, didn't I? I cannot wait to tell the Intergalactic Xenobiology Conference. They will never believe that combat fieldwork enhances research focus. I believe standard procedure is evacuation now, Elias asked hopefully. Because I would really like some medical attention and maybe several of those fermented beverages humans are so fond of. Rostova's crest feathers rose in what I recognized as deep respect. Standard procedure is commendations. Specialist Vance. And you, Specialist Kalen. This is the second time you've held against impossible odds. Just doing our jobs, Commander, I said, finally managing to stand. My legs shook only slightly. No, Rostova looked at both of us, her expression serious. You've done far more than that. You've proven something important. Humans can fight without weapons. Yes. But more than that, they can teach others to do the same. To improvise, to adapt, to survive. Elias laughed, then winced and held his ribs. That's a very poetic way of saying we're too stubborn to die properly. Perhaps, Rostova's expression softened slightly. But it is a quality the Celestial Accord needs, especially now. As medics arrived to treat our injuries and security teams began securing the disabled silicates for analysis, I found myself watching Elias. He sat quietly, letting a medical technician scan his hands, looking utterly ordinary again. But I had seen what those ordinary hands could do, what that ordinary human could accomplish when all our advanced technology failed. Later, in the medical bay, after the adrenaline had worn off and the stark reality of our survival had set in, Elias found me staring at my own hands. Thinking deep thoughts, he asked, his fingers now properly splinted and bandaged. Thinking about what you said, I replied, flexing my own fingers experimentally. About the body always being with you. My people spent centuries developing strategic doctrine, building advanced weapons, achieving tactical superiority through technology. But we never thought to perfect ourselves as weapons. It's not too late to learn, he said, sitting down on the biobed beside me. Every human combat system started because someone needed to defend themselves, their family, their home. It grew from necessity, evolved through practice and repetition. There's no mystery to it, not really. Just dedication and time. Would you teach me? I asked, the question feeling momentous. Not just for combat, but to understand. How you think, how you move, how you see a fight. Elias considered this for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I can do that. Fair warning though, the training is brutal. You'll be sore for weeks. After fighting off silicate shock troops twice, I think I can handle a little soreness, I said. That's what everyone says, he grinned. We start with the conditioning exercises tomorrow morning. Over the following weeks, as the station's engineering crews repaired the extensive damage and Dr. Thorne completed her groundbreaking research, word of our encounter spread through the Celestial Accord. Not just about the silicate attack, but about how it had been repelled. About humans and their strange, effective fighting arts. About the lesson they offered, technology could fail, weapons could break, shields could be adapted against, but knowledge, skill, and the sheer will to survive, those were universal constants. I showed up for my first training session with Elias in the station's gymnasium, expecting to find a few other curious soldiers. Instead, I found 30 personnel from 6 different species, all wearing loose-fitting training clothes, all looking nervous and determined. Elias stood at the front of the group, his hands now fully healed, wearing a white jacket and a black belt tied around his waist. He grinned when he saw the crowd. All right, everyone, he said, his voice projecting easily through the large room. Welcome to Human Combat Systems 101. First lesson, he gestured to his own body, this is your primary weapon. You'll have it from birth until death. So, we're going to learn how to use it properly. He moved to the center of the sparring mat, beckoning for a volunteer. A massive Thar, even larger than Korgoth, stepped forward, a look of confident skepticism on his face. Basic principle, Elias continued, addressing the whole class. We use force multipliers. Leverage. Momentum. Precision. A smaller, weaker opponent can defeat a larger, stronger one if they understand how to apply these principles. What followed was the same display I had seen in the arena weeks ago, but slower this time, broken down into comprehensible steps. Elias explained the physics. And honestly, after everything I'd seen, everything I'd survived, I wouldn't have it any other way. What followed was the single most humbling experience of my life. The demonstration Elias had given, the one that had seemed so fluid and effortless, was revealed to be the product of thousands of hours of grueling, painful practice. Our first lesson was not about striking or throwing. It was about falling. Elias made us get on the mats and fall, over and over again. Forward, backward, sideways. We learned to slap the mat to disperse impact, to tuck our chins, to roll through the motion. My own body, a frame I had always considered sturdy and reliable, felt clumsy and alien. My scales, which offered me some protection, scraped against the hard surface. By the end of the first hour, my entire body ached in ways I never knew were possible. My partner for the exercises was a Sylvari named Lyra, a slender, plant-based being whose skin had the texture of smooth bark. His species were known for their incredible speed and reflexes, but he lacked physical mass. I, being a Zypharian, was stronger and heavier. The first time we tried a simple breakfall drill, I moved with too much force, sending him tumbling across the mat with a surprised rustle of his leaf-like hair. Too much strength, not enough control, Elias said, his voice calm as he walked over. He helped Lyra up. Kaylin, you're used to your strength being an advantage. Here, it's a liability until you learn precision. You're trying to muscle through the technique. You need to flow with it. For the next week, we focused on the fundamentals. Stances, movement, balance. Elias would walk among us, making tiny corrections. Lower your center of gravity, Kaylin. You're fighting yourself. Lyra, feel the connection to the floor. Don't float on top of it, root yourself to it. I spent my evenings soaking in a medical bath, my joints protesting, my mind reeling. I was a specialist in tactical analysis, my brain was my primary tool. Now, I was being forced to build a new kind of intelligence, one in my muscles and nerves. It was infuriating and, I had to admit, fascinating. I began to see the world differently. I noticed the way people walked, the way they carried their weight, the subtle shifts in balance that preceded movement. I was learning to read the world not as a series of tactical objectives, but as a continuous flow of physical energy. The class began to shrink. Some couldn't handle the physical strain. Others, like a hulking Thar named Grak, grew frustrated that their immense strength was neutralized by superior technique. He tried to overpower a smaller human trainee during a drill and ended up on his back, looking utterly bewildered. He didn't return the next day. But those who stayed, we grew closer. We were a strange group, a Zypharian, a Sylvari, a Thar, a Grom, and a handful of humans and other species. We were bound by the shared struggle, by the mutual respect that came from being repeatedly thrown to the mat by one another. About a month into our training, just as I was finally beginning to feel like I was getting the hang of a basic hip throw, an urgent summons came through for Elias and me. We found Commander Rostova in the strategic planning room, her face grim. The holographic display in the center of the room showed a map of a nearby star system, the Cygnus Rift. "We have a situation," she said, without preamble. 3 days ago, we lost contact with a long-range reconnaissance vessel, the Stardust Drifter. It was piloted by a Sylvari scout named Lien. My heart sank. I knew the name. Lien was a renowned scout, one of the best. He was also Lyra's older brother. We assumed it was a systems malfunction or a random navigational hazard, Rostova continued. But we just received a fragmented distress call. It wasn't a ship malfunction. It was a silicate attack. The silicates are operating this far out? Elias asked, his casual demeanor gone, replaced by a sharp focus. Worse, Rostova said, tapping a control on the console. An image appeared on the display, a short, corrupted video file. It showed Lien, his leafy hair disheveled, his face a mask of fear. Behind him, the sleek bridge of his ship was in ruins, replaced by the pulsing, geometric growth of a silicate hive structure. They didn't just destroy his ship, she said, her voice heavy. They captured him. And they've turned his vessel into a mobile outpost. The implications were terrifying. The silicates weren't just raiding, they were establishing forward bases, learning, adapting. And with a captive Sylvari scout, they had access to a mind that held detailed navigational data of dozens of uncharted but resource-rich systems. We need to get him back, I said, the words coming out before I had even fully formed the thought. And we need to destroy that outpost before it can transmit any data. Rostova looked at me, then at Elias. That's why I called you. A full-scale assault would be detected. They'd execute Lien and transmit the data before we got close. We need a small, stealth team to infiltrate the vessel, extract the target, and plant a demolition charge. I'll go, Elias said immediately. I'm going too, I added. Rostova nodded, as if she had expected this. I'm also assigning Lyra to your team. My breath caught. Commander, with respect, his brother. Is precisely why he's the only one for this job, Rostova interrupted gently. He knows how Lien thinks. He knows Sylvari scout protocols. He can predict things no one else can. He has already volunteered. The mission was a suicide run. We would be taking a small, unmarked shuttle, flying deep into silicate-controlled territory, and boarding a hostile vessel that was once a friend's ship. As we left the briefing room, I found Lyra waiting for us. His normally vibrant green skin was a pale, sickly yellow. They said you're leading the extraction, he said, his voice a quiet rustle. We're a team, Elias corrected. We all have a part to play. Lyra looked at me, his multifaceted eyes filled with a desperate hope. In the gym, you are learning. You are learning our way. Not just force, but flow. Can you use it? Can you use it to save him? I thought of all the bruises, the frustration, the hours of falling and getting back up. I thought of the way Elias moved, not like a warrior, but like a force of nature. I thought of the new way I was starting to see the world. Yes, I said, with a certainty that surprised even myself. I can. The journey to the Cygnus Rift was tense and silent. Lyra navigated, his fingers flying over the controls, his knowledge of hidden nebulae and sensor blind spots allowing us to slip past silicate patrols. I went over the ship's schematics, memorizing every corridor, every junction, every potential choke point. Elias spent the time in a state of quiet meditation, conserving his energy, preparing his mind. We found the Stardust Drifter adrift near a gas giant, its hull scarred and covered in the strange, crystalline growths of the silicate hive. It looked like a beautiful tree that had been strangled by a parasitic vine. Docking was a delicate operation, using magnetic clamps to latch onto a maintenance port that had been left mercifully untouched. Inside, the ship was a nightmare. The familiar, curved corridors of Sylvari design were now warped and bisected by angular, humming silicate architecture. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and something else, something sterile and organic, like a hospital and a graveyard combined. Lyra led the way, moving with a silent grace that was breathtaking to behold. He would pause, holding up a hand, and we would freeze as a silicate patrol shuffled past, their networked consciousness oblivious to our presence. We reached the brig, a section of the ship that had been completely rebuilt by the silicates. Lien was there, suspended in a stasis field, wires and probes connected to his body. His face was contorted in pain. Standing guard were 4 silicate shock troops. But these were different. They had new modifications. Their joints were covered in a spiked, overlapping armor plating. Their hands were not just claws, but fitted with what looked like high-voltage tasers. They had adapted. They had built defenses specifically against Elias. They've learned, I whispered, my tactical mind racing. A direct assault is impossible. We have to create a diversion, Elias said, his eyes scanning the room. Something big. I looked at the power conduits running along the ceiling. They were silicate additions, pulsing with a dangerous energy. An idea, born not of my tactical training but of the new, physical way of thinking I was learning, sparked in my mind. Lyra, I said. Can you use your light emission ability? Not just a flash, but a sustained, high-frequency pulse? Something to overload their optical sensors. Lyra's bark-like skin twitched. It will drain me. And it might cause permanent damage to my photoreceptors. It's our only shot, I said. He nodded. Do it. While Lyra began to build up the energy, I turned to Elias. The conduits. If we can overload one, it will create an EMP burst. It might disable their tasers and the stasis field. But it will also bring the whole ship down on us. Elias grinned, that familiar, reckless grin. I like it. It's a terrible plan. How do we overload it? We can't shoot it, I said. The energy shield will absorb it. We need a physical impact. A focused one. I looked at the ceiling, then at a heavy equipment locker bolted to the wall. I looked at Elias. He understood instantly. We moved into position. Lyra stepped out into the open, his body beginning to glow. It started as a soft green light, but it rapidly intensified, shifting through the spectrum into a blinding, painful white. The silicates recoiled, their optical sensors swiveling, their movements becoming erratic as their networked consciousness was flooded with useless data. Now! I yelled. Elias didn't punch the locker. He didn't use brute force. He moved with the flow I had been practicing for weeks. He used his legs, his hips, his entire body in a single, explosive motion, driving his shoulder into the locker not with strength, but with perfect leverage. The bolts groaned, then sheared off. As the locker flew through the air, Elias swept my legs out from under me in a perfectly timed sacrifice throw. As I fell, I twisted, channeling all my frustration, all my training, all my hope into a single, focused kick. My foot, guided by weeks of practice, struck the flying locker with pinpoint precision, redirecting its trajectory. It flew across the room and slammed into the main power conduit with a deafening crack. The world exploded in a shower of sparks. The lights went out, plunging us into darkness, save for the afterimage of Lyra's light. The silicates crashed to the floor, the new systems fried. The stasis field around Lien flickered and died. Go, go, go! Elias yelled, grabbing the dazed Lien and throwing him over his shoulder. We ran. Alarms blared. The ship groaned around us, its structural integrity failing. We scrambled back to the airlock, the sound of the silicate hive collapsing behind us. We threw ourselves onto our shuttle just as the Stardust Drifter was torn apart by a series of catastrophic internal explosions. As our shuttle shot away from the debris field, I lay on the floor, my body screaming in protest, my heart hammering. We had done it. We had used Sylvari stealth, Zypharian tactics, and human combat arts. We had adapted. And we had won. Weeks later, back on the station, Lien was recovering in the medical bay. Lyra was by his side, his skin glowing a healthy, contented green. Elias and I were in the gym. The class was bigger now, filled with new recruits from a dozen species, all eager to learn. Elias nodded to me. Your turn to demonstrate. I stepped onto the mat. My partner was a massive Xar, even bigger than Grak had been. He looked down at me with skepticism. I smiled, a calm, confident smile. I no longer saw an opponent. I saw a problem of balance, leverage, and geometry. I had not just learned to fight. I had learned to see. The first time I saw a human fight without weapons, I laughed. Now, as I prepared to teach a Xar twice my size how to fall, I finally understood. It wasn't about being a weapon. It was about having the unshakable will to survive, and the wisdom to pass that will on to others. And as I helped the Kthar to his feet after a perfectly executed throw, I knew, with absolute certainty, that the celestial accord was stronger for it. We were all stronger for it.